Hello, sweet friends, and welcome to the Rebookery channel. I am Gina, and I am so glad you are here with me today. So I am going to, in this video, show you guys how I have been mixing paper and fabric and paper and kind of blurring the lines of traditional paper collage and slow stitching with fabric. And I'll kind of give you some revelations that I've had as I've gone throughout this journey. So let me start with a piece that I'm working on right now. This is a work in progress. I might have shown this to you already before. This was on a square of, it was like paint by number fabric. I think I had it in my Etsy shop about 3 weeks ago, I think. Anyway, so what I did was blurring the lines between what we traditionally do with paper and what we traditionally do with fabric. I'm trying to mesh those things together. And so this was kind of a little experiment. So the first thing I did was the background I painted, and I painted on the fabric. And so I just used markers that were paint markers. I think, let me get my package and I'll show you. I just used, these are Posca paint markers, but there's other brands of paint markers, and it's gonna be, you want paint because you literally want this paint to like sit on top of the fabric and to go in the fibers, not like a water-based marker or something, because that's going to be more translucent and you want this to be more opaque, or at least I did. So that was my first layer. And then what I did was I just started building it up with pieces of fabric and just some odd, strange things, some labels. And I mixed up on this, I actually mixed up my stitching with some machine stitching and then some hand stitching. But here's where I'm kind of blurring those lines, is I'm adding paper. And so how I added paper was I just glued the back of the paper, and I just use my trusty old Elmer's all-purpose glue stick, or I'll use matte medium. And once I glue that down, then I can go back and I can stitch. But this is kind of a work in progress, and this is what I'm trying to get to, is to get to a place where I create things that are a mishmash of paper and fabric. And so when I finish this, this will go into this journal that I might have shown you before. Again, this is a mix of paper and fabric, and this is one of those that I've done tab binding, so I'm making it up as I go. And what I'll probably do is glue it onto this piece right here, and then I'll go through and hand stitch around it. So there's one of the pieces that I've been working on. Here's another piece that I've been working on. Now this is not going to be in a journal because it's way too big. This is going to be a wall hanging. I'll try to get the whole thing in here. So this came about because I had this, it's almost like canvas, but I think there's maybe some sort of polyester or synthetic on the back of it, but it's really sturdy, really heavy. I got some at the thrift store a few weeks ago, and I got it because I wanted it to be the background. So one of the things that I've realized as I'm going through this journey is that I need to delegate my fabrics, kind of like you do your papers when you collage. What are going to be your backgrounds, and what are going to be all of your things that you build up your story. So in a video a long time ago, when I was talking about collage and journaling and stuff, I talked about your foundation is like a cake, and then you build that cake up with lots of icing and frosting and sprinkles and all that good stuff. So it's kind of the same thing. And so this is my cake. This is my foundation. And then from there, I just built up all kinds of different layers and sprinkles and icing and all that good stuff. Now, this is a work in progress. I am not done with this. I need to go ahead and just make this disclaimer. I am not an expert on stitching. I am not very well versed in stitching. I know like a few stitches, and there are so many amazing stitchers and artists out there that you can get so much inspiration and learn so much from. If you are interested, I would strongly recommend on Instagram and YouTube, Roxy Creations. They are actually doing, they did this, it's like a challenge that they did for the last 6 months, the Journal of Stitchery, Roxy's Journal of Stitchery, and they're actually just starting up the second part of that. And so even though I don't participate in that, I do watch what they do, and I watch their videos, and I learn so much from them. So that's just one place where you can get some information. But for me, I'm stitching for me, so I'm okay if my stitches are messy and all that good stuff. So the way I did this was I laid everything out how I wanted, and then I pinned things down. And once I pinned things down, and I didn't pin all this stuff on top, I started with like maybe 1 or 2 layers. I pinned things down, and then I decided, what do I want to stitch? Now, I'm super proud of myself because I am always a hurry up and let's get done type of person. And so like I am more about quantity than quality, and I'm trying to slow down, which is why I'm excited about slow stitching, because it's making me slow down. It's making me be more mindful. It's making me do a lot of thinking and enjoy the process. So one of my go-tos is to go over to my sewing machine and just stitch it down. I did not do that at all with this piece, and I'm not going to. I'm going to do hand stitch everything. So you can see like some of my stuff is just really, I'll show you this right here. This is just really basic stitches, you know, like I've just got these little long stitches, cross stitches, running stitches, and that's about it. I don't need a large repertoire of stitches to get what I'm gonna get done, because it's not about the embroidery and the needlework for me. That's like the glue that's holding all the other pieces together, if you think about it like that. For me anyway. Now there are people who actually the stitches are their story, and that's amazing and that's wonderful, but that's not what I'm trying to get out of it. So I will stitch down things. I don't stitch down everything like this right here. This is not stitched down because I'm stitching all this other stuff on top of it. But I'll put something on, I'll stitch it, and then I'll go and I'll add another layer. I've added in some paper, and this is a recipe, and this is a piece of paper. And you have to be really careful, or at least I have been really careful with how I'm adhering paper, because especially with us using old paper, it can rip, and if paper's not forgiving, if you poke a hole in it with your needle, that hole is going to stay there. Whereas with fabric, you know, your hole will probably close back up if you just maneuver your fabric a little bit. So again, I use my trusty glue stick to glue things down. You can also use fusible webbing. There's some fusible webbing that you can use for really delicate fabrics. Just, you know, follow the directions and stuff on it. But pretty much that's, you know, I'm just kind of making it up as I go, and I'm kind of teaching myself as I go. So this is a piece that I'm still working on. And I've got a lot of stitching still to do. Like you can see up here, I started to stitch across the top, but I haven't finished. And then this is some really cool trim that I found at the thrift store. So these two quilt pieces right here. So I unpicked a quilt, and then let's see, that was a couple weeks ago. And so when you unpick a quilt, you're taking apart all the stitches, and so you'll have a top and you'll have the back. And then you'll have what's in between. So like it could be batting, it could be another blanket. In the case of this one, it was this tablecloth right here. Whenever this quilt was made, they used this old and these were the original holes in the tablecloth. They used this old tattered tablecloth as the batting on the inside. So that was like, when I found that, I about fell over. It was amazing. So this was part of the quilt top. Full disclosure, I'm going to be putting this quilt top and the backing in my Etsy shop later this week. I have five pieces that I'm going to be putting in my Etsy shop. So watch for that. Okay, so this is another piece. So I'll put this over to the side. All right, so here's a couple of things. Well, actually, let me push these to the side. Let me show you. Here's what I've figured out that has helped me as I'm getting ready to do this journey with stitching and collaging with fabric and paper and stuff like that. So here's what I've found. I need to have my supplies organized. At least for me, I need to. And so one of the things that I've done is I've said, okay, what are my foundation pieces and what are all of my on top pieces, my icing, my sprinkles. So this bag is a bag that I've just started putting fabrics in that will be like my foundation pieces, because I'm not working in a journal right now, and I'm actually working on standalone pieces that I could later put into a journal if I wanted. I have to figure out, like what's my background. So these are just some quilt blocks or some quilt pieces. Like I took an old quilt and I cut it up. Full disclosure, I'm going to have some bundles of these in my Etsy shop later this week, and I'm super, super, super excited about it. I think I'm going to be able to have 8. Yeah, I have 8. I'll have 8 bundles. And yeah, they're going to have 4 different quilt blocks in different sizes. Oh, love them. Okay. But anyway, so here, these could be some backgrounds. And this is they're stained pink because somewhere along the lines of this quilt, its life, it probably got washed with something red. And so it's kind of stained a little pink. Here are some more little quilt blocks that I just have in my stash that I've picked up along the way. Here's some pieces of felt. Here's just some pieces of some cloth. And I think this is actually some embroidery pattern cloth. Here's more pieces of this was an old baby blanket. And so I had cut this down, and so I got some pieces of that. This is some pieces of, we would call this muslin, but if you watch other stitchers that are in Europe and like England and Australia, they will call this calico, but it's just a thin, basically plain cloth that would be good for a background. This is some chenille, so it's a little bit heavier. And so whenever I'm going across fabric or looking at my fabric and I come across something and I'm like, oh, that would be a good background, I throw it in this bag, and that way when I want to start a piece, or if I think about, let's say it's nice and I want to go sit outside and do my stitching, I'll grab a piece of fabric from here, and then that will be my background, and then I'll start putting all my good stuff on top. So there's one piece of my organization. So another piece of my organization is that I have tubs of if we're going with the cake analogy, tubs of my icing and my sprinkles. And so I'm going to say this is sprinkles. Let me show you some of my icing. Okay, so this would be like a tub of just scraps of fabric, okay? And I would take this with me and, oh, look at this. 2 little potholes. Ooh, these would be good. Ooh, these would be good backgrounds. Okay, I'm gonna put that in that bag. But these would just be fabric scraps. This is from clothing, sheets, needlework, quilt, just all kinds of upholstery fabric, just all kinds of fabric scraps. So anytime I have a scrap of fabric, I throw it in here, and then this is going to be what I dig from when I want to do some stitching. And truth be told, I have about 5 of those bins that have fabric scraps. And so I just kind of, if I'm going, going to go stitch, I just grab one of them, and it's got different fabrics and stuff. So this is what I would call the sprinkles. If we're building a cake, we're going to put the sprinkles on the very top. This is full of all of the fun little bits that we would put on top of a piece. This would be our details. This would be our finishing part. This would finish up the story that we're getting ready to tell. And so this is just a mishmash of just some cut up embroidery, some tablecloths, some actual fabric, and I'm going to show you here in just a second a really cool thing you can do if you don't have a stash like this, because probably not everybody does, but there are some cool ways that you can get a little stash like this. So you can see I've got some laces and some trims, and yeah, so this would be my stuff that I would put on and finish up whatever piece I'm working on. This would be like my details or my fine finishings that I would put on there. Okay, so there's that. So I also have a little bin of just some paper ephemera, some catalog clippings, some little cards, wrapping paper, stamps, tickets, tags. And this would also be something that I would put on probably towards the end, depending on what it was and how big it was. And it would help tell that story, but it would be like a finishing piece. All right, so now let's look at a couple of pieces. Let me show you one that I did the other day. So the other day I grabbed a piece from my bag, and this was just I don't know where I got this, but it was these quilted blocks, and there were 9 of them. And gosh, I think I sold them in kits like years ago on Etsy. But anyway, I have 9 of them, and so they're perfect little backgrounds. So I grabbed this. I loved the blue. And then let me show you, because I am limited with my stitches. Like, I just don't have a lot of stitches, and I don't use the stitches to tell the story, but yet I can still tell a story. And let me show you my cheat, or let me show you what I do so that I can tell the story. All right, so this is a vintage sheet, and I picked this up at the thrift store. It was $2, and I actually, true story, I got it because I wanted the tag off of the sheet, and I thought, well, I'll just take the tag, because I think it was a Sears maybe, or JCPenney's, and I'm obsessed with tags, and I thought, well, I'll just take the tag off, sew it back up, and then donate this to, put it back in the thrift store. But then I got to looking at it, and I was like, no, I really like this. And so here's how I cheated. What I did was I cut out these shapes, and I used these shapes to help tell my story. Now my stitching comes when I go around the shape, and I don't need a fancy stitch. This is just a back stitch. And I'm practicing my stitches as I'm doing this. I'm learning how to stitch as I go through this. And so this piece in the background, you can't really see, but this piece in the background, it's these flowers. Let me see. I think it's these, maybe these, there's this gray flowers somewhere in here. And so that's the back. And then all I did was I just did a little stitch around here. I didn't do any detail. Then once I got that down, I just started building up. And so I found some of those cut up embroidery pieces. I put some lace. I practiced my French knots, which my French knot skills are not the best, but that's okay. So I was practicing that. I put some tickets on here, some scraps of fabric, and then this is a clothing label, and did some stitching up here with a piece of embroidery. And so yeah, I'm so proud of this piece. I think this is so, I'm just so proud of myself because I did the whole thing. The only thing I machine stitched was the label right here, but everything else I did by hand. And then I didn't have to be an expert at stitching because I was able to use cut up embroidery that somebody else had already stitched and had abandoned for whatever reason. So that's my cheat. My cheat is to take fabric that already has some really cool shapes or images and cut those out and use those to stitch around. Use those in your story. So there's this one right here. So this is one that I started, and I'll kind of show you my process that I did here. So I just started with this this block. I looked at the colors and I was like, okay, you know, what could I pull that would go with it? I loved the yellow from that sheet, so I pulled some flowers from that sheet, and all I did was I just cut them out. And so I have a bag here of just pieces of sheets and fabric that I've cut apart, and I just stick them in here. And then, you know, if I'm looking for something, I'll pull it out. I'll see if it works. If it works, I'll go ahead and trim around it. And so, yeah, I just keep a little bag that has these in here. So I pulled these out and I thought, okay, just going to trim them so that I get real close to the edge. And all I'm going to do when I go to stitch these on is I'm just going to do a running stitch around it, you know, where I just do an in and out stitch. Nothing fancy, probably use white thread because I don't want this to stand out. It's just going to be part of the background. Then I went digging through my tub of cut up embroidery and I found this cool piece, and I love how the purple goes with that purple, and then there's those yellows. So this will probably go somewhere in here maybe. And then this was laying on my desk. It's just a piece of, I don't know, it's a piece of fabric or something, but nothing gets thrown away, so we'll probably put that in there. This is a clothing tag, and I feel like I'm going to put that in here. I don't know where. And so you can see how this is starting to come together. So the next thing I would do is I would take my pins and I'd say, okay, if this is where I want to keep stuff, all I'm going to do is pin it on. And once everything is pinned on, now this thing can go in my sewing box. And when I'm ready to go stitch, I just pick this up and I take it with me. Everything's already in place, and all I have to do is get my needle and my thread and then just start stitching. And that's, yeah, like that is so fun. And it's fun because when I'm in the mood to stitch, I don't have to worry about composition and color and all that stuff because I've already put it together. I've already got it on this block and I'll have it pinned. So all I do is I pick it up and then I go and I do my stitches. So there's that piece right there. Okay, so I got one more. Okay, so let's say, how would you start this? Okay, so how would I start this? So the first thing I would do, let me walk you through what I've come up with and how I've been doing this. First thing I would do is I grab a piece of my background. Now I got a couple of different choices here. I could either go with a standalone, or I have my fabric journal that I could work in. It doesn't matter which one It's basically going to be the same process, but I think what I'll do is I'll show you this, this quilt block. So I'm going to take, this as my background. And now what I want to do is I want to find out what's the story that I want to tell. And so I have this hole right here. And most people would probably think, okay, well, you got to throw that away because it's got a hole. But I actually really like that hole. And I want to see if somehow I can play off of that and kind of make it kind of like the star of the show. So I'm going to dig around in my basket here, and I'm going to see if I can find anything that wants to tell a story. And because this is that pink, even though I'm on the white side, I'm going to find something that'll kind of color coordinate. Ooh, there's a butterfly. That's kind of pretty. So I'm just going to dig around. There's some purple. And see if I can find anything that kind of sticks out. I kind of like, this is a piece of fabric. It wasn't supposed to be in that basket, but it got put in there. So this is a piece of fabric that came from let's see, it's like not a wallpaper sample, but a fabric sample. So like designers and paint stores will have these books that have their fabric and wallpaper. So this was, I have some of these books, and this was one that is fabric, and it was just one that I'd used for something. And so this is a scrap. So I always like scraps. I feel like they're the underdog. So if I can somehow, because I like that red, I like the orange and the green. So I know I wanted to do something with that tear, but if I do this, it'll cover it up. What if? Let's try this. What if this? Oh, yes. Oh, look at that. Okay. Yes, I love that. Okay, what if we put this on the back, and then when I go to stitch my fabric. Oh, yes. Okay, I'm going to pin that in place because we're going to keep that right where it's at. So I'm going to pin it here. Now this is going to be difficult because the quilt that's on top is seriously fragile. So I may have to add some glue to that to get it to hold. I don't know. We'll see. Oh my gosh. Okay. I freaking love that. Okay. And so now I would just cut that off. Let me grab my scissors and I'll just rip it off because I kind of like it showing through. Okay. This little thing fell out somewhere. Well, we're gonna find a place for him. He's going in there somewhere. Okay. So there's that. I don't know. Okay. Okay. I'm just so excited about that. That's awesome. All right. So let's dig around in here. So I have some yellow flowers. I kind of like the colors of that. And so if this is something that I truly wanted to use, I like to cut it as close to the image as possible. You can leave a little bit of an allowance if you want to stitch on, but for this, I think I'm going to go as close to the image as I possibly can. And again, this is not the star of my show. This is just going to be part of the background. So if we're doing the cake analogy, this is still part of my cake. Okay, kind of like that somewhere in here. That's kind of cool. One of the things I've figured out is that sometimes if your fabric is too bright, flip it over to the back side and you get more of that muted tone, and that's kind of cool too, especially if you're working on a background, because that's a great way to have it kind of fade into the back. I like how that's going together. All right, let's dig through here again, see what else we could find. Strawberries. Here's some pink lace. Ooh, I kind of like that. I kind of like that. Let's see.
Alright, I'm looking for it. Let me see if I can find it. I have this piece of some needlework. It was an abandoned piece of needlework, and it was really heavy. I can't see. Can't seem to find it. Uh-oh, where did it go? Because I think it would be really groovy on this, because it was bright red. It was like a bright red tulip or rose. Dear goodness, I'm making a mess. For the love of biscuits, where did it go?
Oh, there it is. Okay. All right. So, check this out. Now, I don't know where this can, I don't know if this is going to fit in here, but I kind of like it. I don't know. We'd need something to kind of balance it out over here. So maybe that. This is kind of, ooh, I love this. Something. Oh my gosh. Okay. Yeah, this is good. Look at this little piece too. That can maybe go through here. And then, and I'm just playing around. I don't know if this is going to stay. But then I can pull in some paper. So if look right here on top, here's two reds that I was going to use on something else, but that kind of looks cool. Ooh, I like that. I really like that. Okay. I also like this little tag. It says 1 hour martinizing. That's just because, I don't know, it's unexpected. And then something else that I had sitting over here was a piece of wallpaper. So if we cut out images off of fabric, we could also cut off images out of paper. And so I had some wallpaper here, and I could cut this image out right here and then put it on, and I could stitch around it. I just need to be careful though, because whenever I stitch on paper, whatever holes I put in are going to stay. So I have to just be very careful. One of the things I've kind of figured out with paper is that if it's a fragile piece, like this little piece right here, which is kind of cool and it could fit down in there. And this is an old fragile piece. So if I take it and if I back it onto a thin fabric, it just kind of gives the paper a little more stability. And then when I go to stitch in it, again, just being mindful because the paper is still showing. If I put a hole in it, I'm going to see, but I just need to be very careful and make sure that where I put my holes are where I want them to be. But it just kind of makes that paper a little more sturdy. And I could maybe tuck that in down here. Have that leaf showing. Oh, I kind of like that. I really kind of like that. I feel like maybe I'm going to pop that yellow a little bit more. All right. Oh my goodness. So if I'm cool with this, I'm going to make sure we're still in frame here. If I'm cool with this, my next step would be to pin this puppy dog down, and then it's ready for stitching. Yeah. Ooh, that's awesome. Okay. Yay! Okay, we got creative, my friends. And yeah, I'm super excited. I did not expect this to happen at all. Okay, so real quick before I go, let me show you a couple other things you can do. So mixing those collages of your slow stitching and then paper collage, mixing those up, trying out some different surfaces. So stitching on paper. So this is going to be a little bit different because this, our foundation was fabric. This, our foundation, would be paper. And in the case of this, it's an old postcard. And so just being mindful of wherever you stick your holes, they're going to show through your paper because they won't go away. But you can make collages onto a paper surface, and then your fabric would be like your icing, your frosting, and your sprinkles. And so this was all hand stitched. This was not machine stitched. And then I glued some little words from a book page. Here's another one. I actually put beads on this. And so here's the back. Oh, that's kind of cool. I'd done this a while ago, so it's like I've seen it for the first time here. And then, so this was like paper and then fabric. And then this was a piece of, oh my gosh, some packaging, probably for some buttons or snaps or something. So yeah, that's kind of cool. This is, I've showed you guys these before, but these are these Pantone cards that I have, and it's paper, but then this is fabric. So the reason why I'm showing you this is because you don't need this Pantone part, but this is fabric. Here I have painted on fabric, and I just used regular old acrylic paint. It wasn't a marker or anything. And then I stitched some wrapping paper, and then I stitched an actual a photo on here. And I did machine stitch this. I didn't hand stitch this. So there's lots of different ways that you can blur the line between fabric collage and paper collage and slow stitching. But the takeaway is this. You don't need to have any special supplies. You don't need to have any special skills. If you can thread a needle and you can make one in and out stitch, if you can use a glue stick and you can cut things up with scissors, then you've got everything you need. Just get creative and look around and see, what can I use to help tell my story? And I think you'll be surprised with some of the results and things that you come up with. Okay, my friends, watch for another video this week, because I'm planning on doing a cool big fabric extravaganza drop in my Etsy shop a little later this week. I've got some fabric, like some kits, but they're color coded. I've got some quilt squares. I may even have some, oh, I've got some quilt tops and the quilt backs. Yeah, maybe some journals too. We'll see. All right, my friends, I hope you are healthy. I hope you are happy. I hope you do something creative today. I hope you were totally inspired, and I will talk to you soon. Bye.